Welcome to the News9 Plus show on the world's first news and current affairs OTT platform, News9 Plus. I want to introduce our guest for the evening, Lieutenant General Sharma. General Sharma has commanded the 14th Corps in Ladakh and retired as the Indian Army's Adjutant General, and he continues to be a prolific commentator on national security.
Thank you, Sandeep. Thank you for inviting me.
General Sharma, first off, how do you see the international situation now with what's going on in Gaza as we speak?
So I take a step back and take a call as to why the power politics of this region led to an incident like that. And my good guesswork is that all these policies that have been around for now some time had led to kind of marginalization of the Palestinian cause. And people were more interested in the Abraham Accords or the I2U2s or the IMAX,
right,
or the exchange of envoys between Saudi Arabia and Syria, and whatever the stuff that the United States was providing to F-16s to UAE. So the Palestinian cause was being increasingly marginalized.
Right.
As it is, West Bank, 60% of territory is now with the occupied Zone 3. Zone C, and
right,
these are settlements across there, so there was nothing left. So if you added all this together, I think the pivot that we have been talking about for quite some time was pivot away from West Asia or Middle East onwards towards Asia and other areas. So the Hamas had to do something strong, something barbaric, something not normal rocket firing 5, 6, 10, 20.
Right. To bring attention back to the
Palestinian cause.
To the Palestinian cause.
So if you count the world, everybody,
right,
now Palestinians back into that form.
Right.
It's the prime issue of debate today. And
right,
in that manner, the Hamas and what they did succeed.
Yeah, so I'm just looking at the statements out of the UN, where the UN head, Antonio Guterres, has said that Gaza is being strangled, and the UN Security General has said that the Middle East is on the verge of an abyss. So in a sense, Hamas seems to have achieved what they set out to in this horrific attack. They've, you think, once again internationalized the whole Palestine issue?
So it has. You see the demonstration that took place in London. The whole roads were blocked by people who were favoring Hamas. So what they did was Hamas did was absolutely barbaric,
right,
and brutal. But the fact is that they have come across to achieve some kind of their aim of bringing to fore. Same UN Security Secretary General last year, when he went to Gaza, said this is an open air jail.
Right.
If it was an open air jail last year, nothing had moved forward to bring it out. 16 years Gaza has been blockaded. Right. It's been from 2007 onwards. So what Hamas didn't actually resort to this firing of 10 rockets or 20 rockets. They did something atrocious, and it brought to fore. And also there was a weightage being given more to West Bank as against Gaza Strip.
So you think the Israeli establishment took its eyes off the ball, and they kind of focused on the wrong threat?
To add, I think they were mollycoddling Hamas.
Right.
For quite some time. The government was mollycoddling Hamas as against the other areas of West Bank, because see, the national security minister comes from West Bank. He's from the occupied territories, and if the large areas and settlements, 6 lakh people, 600,000 people of Israeli origin stay in occupied territories. Focus was shifting. A thought process had come that there will be a next intifada which will take place in the West Bank,
right,
or there will be the forcible occupation, or the Israelis will make the mosque, that issue of making one more mosque. So the thought had changed. I think that lulled the Israelis, and Gazans took advantage. Hamas took advantage of all that it was happening.
But General Sharma, what you just mentioned, isn't that the case with us as well? If you look at it, in our case, we are also facing a two-front war, but a conventional threat. For the longest time, we focused on Pakistan and our eastern front, or as we call it, the northern front with China, was kind of on the back burner. We focused on the the primary threat. We regarded Pakistan as the primary threat, whereas China has now kind of reactivated the northern front as well. So is that in a in a manner of speaking what happened?
So I think that's a 3-pointer.
Israel.
You have actually created a good parallel here. from what 80s onwards, we were lulled by the Chinese because the joint working groups, the treaties we were signing with the Chinese, 93, 2000, 96. As you come up to the 2020, they were, and so many meetings have taken place. In
confidence building measures and you
principals
had that
meeting.
Absolutely, yeah.
Principals meeting. So it was kind of lulled. You know, this is the issue which I think is most important to us. The illusions created by the adversary.
Right.
The illusions created by the Hamas over a period of time that they were becoming goody-goody and they were becoming more amenable to, because 20,000 people were now allowed to go from Gaza to work in Israel every day.
Yes.
So things were changing. That goody-goodiness actually lulled the Israelis into complacency. That's why you could hold a rave party right next to the borders and whatever you were doing.
Right.
We, and now drawing your parallel, what you are saying, Sandeep, is that we could have been little lulled into complacency, though writing was on the wall on the Chinese side from 2013 onwards. If you recollect, the first time the Chinese came in. So, that way.
So that the lesson for us from this crisis, as you mentioned, is never, lower your guard, especially when you're looking at unsettled boundaries. You have an adversary over there, and that's the simple. Is there any other lesson that you draw from this situation?
So, I feel that you can always get surprised or always get deceived, despite the fact that you do scenario building exercises, you think many ways this can happen, that can happen. Each one of the instances that has happened is absolutely different. What happened in Kargil was different. What happened in Mumbai was different. We were there in Mumbai,
yes.
26/11, and what happened in 2020 was different. Each one, and see here, they came barging with dozers across and cut the fence.
Right.
And this was a military operation. This had nothing to do with a terror operation.
Right.
This was a militarily planned, executed, coordinated operation. Except that it was executed by a terror organization. So they behaved like a terror organization.
So that's interesting. When you say that it's a military operation, do you mean that it was planned by serving military personnel of some country? Or
if it has not happened this way, then I would hats off to Hamas. I have a genuine doubts if it has not been orchestrated by some professional who is a leader of conventional warfare.
Right.
Because this was conventional, there was sea, there was air, there was ground, there were rockets, fire support. This is how military operations are planned.
Right.
This is not how Hamas has been planning over a period of time.
So Hamas, I would imagine from one studies their tactics is small team operations, right? I mean, they do these kind of isolated strikes. They fire rockets.
Terror organization.
But to orchestrate, as you're saying, that to orchestrate a brigade minus, which is almost 1,200 fighters, it would take a certain amount of military skills.
And no weapon was issued to people. It was totally kept under wraps. The weapons were issued on that morning when they were supposed to go in.
Right.
So if you count all these pieces together, this was a professional operation, planned, trained for, exercised in their own area and executed. When they went inside, they behaved like absolutely terror organization.
Savages, absolutely.
Savage.
Yeah. The kind of footage that is emerging,
and then, they have now got on all these videos that they have taken for women being picked up and the children being incapacitated, and they are being releasing these videos slowly, which are being picked up by and they are atrocious.
Yeah, I was just looking at one of those videos today where it's a body cam footage of one of these Hamas fighters who's just going in. It's literally. Yeah. We can actually see that video of this short video of this Hamas fighter going in there, and
some
he's
are very
finally
painful
shot.
to watch. They're so atrocious. They're very painful to watch. And how could somebody shoot this thing?
Right. So looking at that video, it just tells you, General Sharma, that they had planned this whole thing with a thing of getting a lot of footage, generating a lot of footage, which then, as you said, they could play out later on to further terrorize. Because when that video kind of plays out, for days and months after the actual attack, then that thing of terror, continues to play, and you're looking at terrorism in the age of social media.
Yeah, so now I would say, there's nothing follow-up to that operation of 7th October by Hamas. Some rockets have been fired, but not, which means is that they planned only one event, not the follow-up events, which is not a military operation like this. So it actually implies that they were actually forcing irrational reaction coming from the Israelis,
Yeah.
and they thought that irrational reaction or that massive reaction, which obviously would come, the psyche of a nation has been hurt, they would be able to get all these issues. My Palestinian cause on the front is also Saudi-Israel normalization and all other talks being carried out, Saudi-Iranian talks.
That's all off now. I think everything is on the back burner. The Saudis are not talking to Israel as they planned.
Actually, the total geopolitical change has been brought about by this event.
Total geopolitical change. That's worrying. And what are the prospects you think of this conflict spreading? You know, the fact that the US has sent in 2 carrier strike groups into the Mediterranean. Does that kind of suggest that there is a possibility the conflict could widen, and which is why they kind of moved in their strike groups there?
So the statement initial of President Biden was a kind of statement one would hear from Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Right.
It was as solid and as potent a statement made by President Biden. But suffice to say that we have seen ground operations being carried out by Gaza, and they haven't been exactly successful. We have also seen the ground operation carried out by Israelis in Lebanon, and they had got hurt in that operation against Hezbollah, 2006 or 7 or something.
In fact, we've just got a report from our TV9 Bharatvash correspondent Manish Jha on the Gaza border. Let's listen into what Manish has to say.
Hi, this is Manish Jha. I am from India.
Hi, Gabriel.
So Gabriel, you are here, and any moment you can go for war. So before coming here, what you were doing?
Before coming here, I was working in an accountant's office, and I was doing some accounting.
So basically, you are an accountant, and then when your country called you, then you are here.
Yes, that's very correct.
Hi, sir. What's your good name?
Micha.
And before coming here, what you were doing?
I'm a school teacher. I teach.
School teacher.
Yes, I teach civic studies and mathematics to the 10th grade.
And now you are having weapon.
I'm having a weapon because that's what my country needs. I hear the call and I have to come here. Not something that I really want to do, but something that I have to do.
You know, I was in Russia last year. I saw lots of Russian citizens were leaving the country. But when I was coming to Israel, I saw lots of Israeli persons were coming back to Israel. So, do you think that this is the specialty of all Israelis? Whenever your country needs you, you are here.
Yes, as we see by the statistics, reserve soldiers are being 150% of reserve soldiers arrived. For myself, I didn't even receive a formal invitation to come here. When I saw the situation on Saturday, I took my uniform, took my bag, packed it, and although we don't have public transportation on Saturday, I asked my father to take me right down here.
Oh my God! So normally, how much time you get when you call for the duty?
It really depends. It varies. We were called up straight away. I was called up straight away, but it depends on people and it depends on the situation.
I'm just asking. So when you got information that you have to come here, so what was your reaction? Your family's reaction?
So we don't have to come here because we are instructors, we are not combat soldiers. But when everything started, of course we wanted to come and help. And our families are worried, I think everyone is worried. But we know we have to do this, we have to help. So we are here.
So as you see, sir, those soldiers that Manish interviewed, they're accountants and regular CV street guys who've kind of been, drafted in. It's 300,000 among the 300,000 soldiers that have been recalled and, pressed into action. What are the chances that they could be a very effective fighting force when you're looking at 300,000 soldiers, which are basic, like you just heard, they were not full-time professional soldiers. How would they be deployed? Would they actually go into Gaza, or would they kind of hold the periphery?
So if we learn from this mass mobilization that the Russians did and the Ukrainians did,
yes,
And we find that the mass mobilization, getting people or able-bodied people to come and basic minimum training and into fighting, they haven't been successful. The Ukrainians have been little stalemated for last 8-9 months. Nothing has moved forward. So to say a poorly trained or ill-trained person can go in, there is a lot of josh, lot of vigor, lot of strength, there is national spirit, there is patriotism. But there is also a requirement of getting on with professional military warfare in an area which is like a can of sardines. It is all jam-packed here. They say 500 kilometers of tunnels. I do not know how much it. If there is an offensive, is it only to create a buffer along the fence, just pushing the people away from the northern part of Gaza? Just create that buffer so that you protect the areas close by. That is one aim. But if you want to go and start searching for hostages and destroying Hamas people and finding who's Hamas, firstly there is 60% unemployment of 15 to 29. Every person could be a Hamas. There is no stamp.
Yeah, how do you tell a guerrilla from a civilian?
The task is not easy in an area like that.
In fact, I was just reading this book by a serving IPS officer. It's called Dignity of Life, and it talks about hostage rescue, and he's a specialist. And he actually writes, I will quote what he's written, about the concentration of force, that there is the idea is the principle of concentration. It's an inviolable principle of rescue strategy where you overwhelm a siege by concentrating forces and breaking all pockets of resistance and freeing your hostages. How does concentration of force apply in a situation like Gaza, which is so complicated? There are tunnels, there's rubble, there's civilians.
So, Sandeep, I even get anxious about universalism of a policy, of doing the same task in a similar manner. We can do concentration of force, mass as we can call it, into areas where you can do it. We did it, if you recollect, in Mumbai, at places we had the mass there and we executed it. Here, the collateral damage itself is the mass. The people who are there in northern Gaza in schools, they are like chawls, traditional. You can't even wish them away. You said 1.1 million, and I think it's an exaggeration to say 600,000 are moved away, because there is nowhere to move away.
That's right.
Because it's just 140
kilometers. So densely packed, as colleague was mentioning that Gaza is like Nariman Point to Kandivali. In Mumbai. It's half the size of Mumbai and it's densely packed.
Absolutely.
Millions of people.
So I'm not very sure whether this, and if the aim of the exercise was to get 200 odd hostages back into own country, men, women, children, then the plan would have been to put them away off the harm's way if the offensive comes in. Any prudent terrorist organization, Hamas, will know what is the response. The air will come, the ships will start firing, the ground forces, the missiles will fire. One day, ground offensive will come. So they would have moved the hostages. I mean, I would reckon they would move the hostages in places where there is dense civilian population, under hospitals, under schools, because
into what's called the Gaza Metro, the tunnel network. It's apparently 500 kilometers under Gaza City, and they've tunneled.
And last year
made this huge elaborate network. And in fact, we have this report from our executive editor, National Security, Aditya Rajkol, who's been in one of those tunnels very recently. Let's take a look.
Well, at this moment, we are very close to the international border between Israel and Gaza. We've often heard, all across the international media, a lot of narrative, a lot of propaganda as well on what exactly happens here. But at this moment, we are at the bank inside a tunnel that was detected a few years back. And this was a tunnel that was used by a terrorist organization, Islamist jihadis as well as Hamas, to in fact raise havoc on the innocent Israeli citizens. And this terror activity has been ongoing for years. These tunnels have been used often by, the Israeli, of course, the Palestinian and of course the Hamas terrorists to in fact attack not only the soldiers but also civilians who stay very close to this international border. These tunnels that we are standing here right behind me, you can see this tunnel. You can very well see how, this is a 2.5 kilometer long tunnel, 900 meters well within the Israeli territory that was used by the Islamist jihadis to in fact do smuggling, a lot of weapons also being brought in to in fact have these attacks. And right now we have a very important guest with us, Jonathan Conricus, Colonel Jonathan Conricus, who is the former international spokesperson of the IDF. You know, I want to begin by asking you, before we go to the tunnels, that we've heard you often, I've seen your videos, in international media, and we've seen a lot of propaganda against Israel. We've seen a lot of narrative as if, there is Israeli occupation, Israel, if one were to believe the news reports, it's almost that every Palestinian house has an Israeli soldier standing outside and there are attacks happening every day. Please give us a clear picture, because we are standing back here. What's exactly happening here?
What's happening is that we have Israeli communities just hundreds of meters by us, and we're standing in a tunnel that was supposed to allow Hamas terrorists to get to those communities and kill Israeli civilians. We have a border about 900 meters away, which is monitored and patrolled by Israeli soldiers, and the purpose of that border is to keep the terrorists in Gaza and to keep Israeli civilians safe. Unfortunately, so many people around the world are fed with misinformation and come to wrong conclusions about the dynamics of the conflict here and perhaps get things mixed up. What I urge people is to believe or to visit themselves if they can, and if they cannot, to consume news from credible sources from the ground with less propaganda, as you said, and with more real information. It's a complex situation, but what I can assure you, as somebody who served in the IDF for 24 years, is that the IDF is, first of all, committed to the security of the State of Israel and Israeli civilians, but it is also committed to international law, and it tries in all of its operations to minimize the influence of its operations on Palestinian civilians, and it tries to distinguish between civilians and combatants, terrorists. What makes it very difficult is that the terrorists don't look like soldiers. They all try very hard to look like civilians. They hide from the using civilians as their human shields, and they use infrastructure like the one we have behind us in order to get to our civilians, to the Israeli civilians, and to attack them. So it's far more complex than is often portrayed in international media. It's an unfortunate situation in Gaza. But what I'm happy about is that today we can stand in a tunnel that was detected and neutralized by Israeli technology. It is no longer a threat to Israeli civilians. And thanks to the high-tech measures that Israel has, we have been able to overcome a significant strategic challenge, tunnel warfare against Israeli civilians. And I know that Israel is also happy to share this knowledge and experience with other militaries around the world who are facing similar threats by different terror organizations.
I'll take that forward, Jonathan, because you made a very important point towards the end that even India and Israel have been cooperating not just on technology, on tech, on drones, but also particularly defense partners. I want to ask you, because I hail from Kashmir, in Jammu and Kashmir, and we have a similar problem there, Pakistan-sponsored terrorism. But one thing that's been noted over the last few years is the tunnels and the drones that are being used.
Yes.
So tunnels are being used not just to smuggle in drugs, but also weapons now. Yeah. And there are active terrorists who are coming in and sneaking in through those tunnels to kill innocent Indians in Jammu and Kashmir. So is there a larger cooperation between India and Israel perhaps also to study, not only get equipment and technology, but to study the patterns and, as you said, neutralize it?
I know that there's significant large-scale cooperation between Israel and India, weapons as well as knowledge and what we call in the military TTPs, tactics, techniques and procedures, which are very important. It took the IDF and the Israeli Defense Establishment about 20 years to figure out the technology and the ways in which to deal with tunnel warfare as effectively as we've done now. So it takes time, and I know that Israel is very happy to share that knowledge with select countries around the world. We are in close partnership with the Americans, but there are a few countries around the world which Israel trusts enough to be able to share that knowledge. And I think that it's definitely something that Israel, A, has an interest, and B, should be looking towards doing, not only systems, but sharing knowledge and the know-how of how to deal with that dimension of warfare, the underground warfare. The big challenge, I think the biggest difference is scope. India is a tremendously large country. Israel is very small, and by being small, the systems you need are confined to very select geographical areas. India faces immense challenges because the border is thousands of kilometers, and any terrorist coming from Pakistan has many different areas where he can opt to operate. That makes it even more challenging, and it forces Indian forces to be even more professional, more alert, and to have access to the best technological systems in the world in order to continue to defend. It's a tremendous challenge, and I think that India should use all of the experience from around the world that is available.
Well, let's hope that happens. So clearly, we are standing right now inside a tunnel where we are reporting about the atrocities of the Hamas terrorists and the Islamist jihadis and the reality of the given situation. India and Israel are in fact marking the 30 years of their diplomatic ties, and India has emerged as one of the biggest defense partners of Israel, also studying the patterns of terrorism and using technology that's been offered by Israel.
So that was Aditya Raj call in the Gaza metro. Aditya, tell us about your experience. What was it like being down there?
Well, it was quite an experience. I was with the Israeli Defense Forces, and they took us to all the borders. The two fronts that we are talking about really, one with Gaza and the other one in the northern Israel with Lebanon. This was just meters away from the border. Actually, from binoculars, I could actually spot Hamas checkpoints inside Gaza from there. And these were tunnels that were located over the years and in the last many months. I was with Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus, who is the international spokesperson of the Israeli Defense Forces.
Who's making all the news and headlines
who's
right
actually
now.
on the global media speaking about what's happening and responding to the propaganda of Hamas as well. And I did a long interview with him where he explains how these tunnels were discovered, what really happens. And as you rightly pointed out, it's Gaza Metro, and these are tunnels all across the region, not only to transport people from Hamas, but also their rockets, their ammunition, and this is kind of a network which even Israel hasn't been able to uncover completely. They know about some tunnels, but not all of them. And that's why when the ground mobilization is happening right now, and the assault really happens in the next few days, the main challenging aspect, apart from room-to-room interventions and building-to-building interventions, would also be unraveling this puzzle of tunnels where many Hamas terrorists would be located, along with a lot of ammunition.
Right. And what did the IDF tell you when you were embedded with them? Did they say how they figured out a way of tracking these tunnels and breaking into them, or have they mapped it out fully, so to speak?
I think on the Israeli territory part, in southern Israel particularly, they have mapped almost all of them.
Right.
But in Gaza, it would be difficult. Another thing that I want to touch about that we have also spoken in the past is a little bit of overconfidence that I saw in the IDF and in the political establishment of Israel. And that perhaps led to some kind of an intelligence failure, and IDF also losing its guard at the Gaza border. Because I felt, and when I spoke to the Israeli IDF senior leaders as well, who maintained that yes, we have a threat, the Hamas controls this territory completely, but never had they expected this kind of a barrage of terrorists coming in gliders and attacking from land, sea and air.
Launching a conventional assault, as you just mentioned.
So, Sandeep, I would also add what rightly pointing out, that has that armed forces become politicized?
Right.
Israelis, because of the nature of the agitation that have taken place in 8-9 months against the judiciary, and when they were calling people for ex-servicemen to come and join back to against their agitation people, they refused to join. So there is somewhere people say even the intelligence agencies were politicized between ultra-right, which the government is, and so does that lead to some kind of loss of competence or something like that? See, this all has to be seen.
Right. So there are a lot of lessons for us to draw from it. While we don't face similar threats as Israel does, but there are larger lessons are the fact that you should avoid these.
One lesson I want to talk, and you talk to you, was proportionality.
Right.
When the Americans went after 9/11 to Afghanistan, there was no proportionality. They hammered whatever they wanted to hammer. They have hammered Iraq like that. Israelis have hammered now Gaza. We do tend to think about laws of the land, laws of warfare, and
Right.
international humanitarian law, and proportional response. I think we need to also study this disproportional response of this kind, and whether we, as you recollect, we have a nuclear doctrine which says massive response.
Yes.
The word massive is disproportional response.
Right.
So do we have to also learn other lessons? If they were firing 60,000 rounds of artillery shells in Ukraine
Right.
on per day,
Right.
that means there is disproportional response. We are not geared for this kind of thing.
You mean to how to respond to a outrage of this kind?
Yeah, and to be able to provide a disproportional response.
Right.
We may be geared to provide a proportional, rational response. But maybe sometimes you have to be prepared, at least it becomes a deterrent to the other side, that
Right.
they have the capacity to give a disproportional response.
Right.
And it is universalism, the world is doing it.
Yeah.
Why don't we also start thinking and talking this?
Right. So, Aditya, there's a very interesting point that General Sharma mentions, proportionate response. We never retaliated in 26/11. We never retaliated when Parliament was attacked.
Yeah.
But that one attack in 2019, when we launched the airstrikes in Balakot, that seems to have solved a lot of our problems, at least in the short term.
I think that Uri was a very big thing. Uri and Pulwama were both very big operations carried out against us. Both in, Uri came from across the borders.
Right.
It is close, Uri right next to, is not very far. And they came and they went to a camp and killed 19 people. And then, of course, Pulwama. So there were responses. We have to get a quiver full of plenty of variety of arrows.
Right.
You can't use one Brahmastra.
Right.
You require a Surya Astra or something. Different types of arrows in a quiver which can be taken out at a particular time.
Right.
And it has to be pre-decided in peacetime. That's what people call about civil-military fusion. We have to think of as much of scenarios as we can. We will still be surprised. We may still be surprised. But if we have thought about many types of response, maybe we will be able to execute some better.
Right. And this eternal question, ever since we've been asking you ever since the war in Ukraine, Russia-Ukraine war, is the tank dead? Talking about weaponry. Do you think the tank is dead? We're looking at visuals of tanks being attacked for the last 1.5 years.
So I'm touching on toes now. There will be good friends who will get annoyed. So the point I wish to raise, tank is not dead. It's a very solid platform.
Right.
Tank has to reinvent itself. There is times comes in the life of everybody when you have to recalibrate yourself. If it is, if the tank of the erstwhile times has had now problems, then we have to stay, maybe directed energy weapons, maybe found something like quick reaction against drones. See, we have to create that kind of environment, and you have to make sure the tank doesn't get too heavy also.
Yeah.
So there is a need of reinventing that tank.
There's a need of reinventing the tank, and in fact, the Merkava tank, we've done a short explainer on this tank, which is the principal fighting vehicle of the Israeli Defense Forces. Take a look. The Merkava is the Israeli Army's principal main battle tank. It's been part of all of Israel's ground offensives since 1982. Now, the Merkava replaced the British-designed Centurion tank. Interestingly, the Indian Army also used the Centurion for over 4 decades. The Merkava replaced the British-designed Centurion tank. Now, interestingly, the Indian Army also used the Centurion for over 4 decades. It was called the Vijayanta. This tank was retired in the late 1990s. Now, the Merkava has been in service for over 4 decades in the Israeli military. It's gone from Mark I to Mark V in the last 4 decades. The Mark IV tank that you see here is one of the most commonly deployed variants. Now, the tank has a crew of 4 persons and a total weight of 65 tons. To give you an idea of how much that weighs, the Arjun Mark II MBT has a weight of 68 tons. Now let's look at the Merkava's capabilities in the triangle of firepower, protection and mobility. Now the tank has a 1500 horsepower engine, and the interesting part about that is the engine is located in the forward part of the tank as opposed to the rear. This engine also affords protection to the crew. when it's mounted in the front. It drives the tank to a speed of about 65 kilometers on the road. Now the tank has a 120 mm main gun which can fire a variety of ammunition, high explosive anti-tank, support rounds like APFSDS and kinetic energy penetrators. It also has a 12.7 mm heavy machine gun in the front to shoot at other vehicles, lightly armored vehicles and fortifications. It's bristling with these MMGs. It's got 3 of these 7.62 mm MMGs on the turret, and the tank is protected by composite sloped armor. But the interesting part about this is a very unique Israeli invention called the trophy self-protection system. It's a active protection system, which means that it fires small projectiles to protect the tank from rocket propelled grenades that are coming in to attack the tank. And this very unique system, it affords an additional layer of protection to this tank. Now, another unique feature of this tank is that it can carry 6 soldiers at the rear. This is very unique because normally main battle tanks don't carry infantry, but this is extremely useful for the Israeli military because when you're fighting in urban combat, you can carry soldiers in as well in protection inside a main battle tank. If the Israeli military moves into Gaza, as it will in the next couple of days, the Merkava is likely to be at the forefront of the fighting. So that was the Merkava, and the interesting part about the Merkava, sir, is that it's been deployed for about 40 years now.
Yeah.
And all its operations, while it was designed for a conventional war, all the operations have been in low intensity conflict, in Beirut, in Gaza, in the West Bank. So I think the tank has to reinvent itself, like you said. But Aditya, coming back to the hostages, there's a very large number of hostages that Hamas has taken. What is the anger, what is the kind of groundswell of public opinion in Israel, and is that propelling what the government is planning to do next with a ground offensive?
I think there are 2 things that are very much visible. One, there's a national unity, because every time we talk about terrorism and particularly about Hamas, and of course the visuals that have come in on Saturday with 1,300 people being butchered, videos of people being beheaded, killed, burnt, that has led to a national unity. And this national unity has formed an emergency unity government, but there's also people who are upset with Benjamin Netanyahu, who are upset with the justice minister and the national security minister. But that will come later. For now, their formidable challenge is to attack Hamas and make them incapable of realizing or dreaming of another such attack. But to your earlier question about India's political will after 26/11, it's a mixture of political will and your capabilities, and if you have the capacity and the bandwidth to control that for a very long time. What I observed after 26/11 is that there was no political will. Shiv Shankar Menon obviously wrote this inside his book that there were options. That does not mean that the Indian army and the intelligence agencies were not prepared. They were very much prepared. They're always prepared with options. In fact, I'm told that they had details of Hafiz Saeed's residence and the headquarters of Lashkar-e-Toiba. Those were pinpointed. They had assets on ground that could have conducted these tasks but were not conducted. And I think more or so, Manmohan Singh government in UPA 1 and UPA 2 at that time had a policy of status quo. They wanted to keep relations at some kind of a bay, and that paradigm shift really happened when Modi actually came in. And there was a response to the to the Uri terror attack with the surgical strike, and after Pulwama we had the Balakot. So it has really only increased, and we have increased the bar so as to say that if there is another such terror attack, there will be a heavier response. But as General Saab really pointed out, I think this kind of a attack where there are 1,500 people walking in paragliders, in small boats and by land on these jeeps is unthinkable. I don't think any army would have really prepared for this kind of an operation, especially Israel. Even though we can't compare Israel and India, the land is low, the population is low, even though their military strength might be much better technologically speaking as well.
So it's a completely different paradigm in warfare. It's almost like a terror attack on the scale of a infantry assault, like a brigade assault. And how do you prepare for that? But thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining me. And this is a story that we'll continue to track on the News 9 Plus show. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandeep.
Interestingly, among the 300,000 Israeli reservists mobilized, there are over 200 Indian Jews fighting in the ranks of the Israeli military. And we have this very interesting report here from our colleague Shanta Shri, who's spoken to the Jewish associations in Israel. Take a look.
Members of the Indian community are taking on Hamas terrorists in Israel.
About 206 reservists have been called for duty.
But back in India, their own community members are facing a twin crisis. First, displaced by the ethnic clashes in Manipur. Second, their dreams of returning to their holy land of Israel shattered. Members of the Benai Minashi community living in Manipur and Mizoram claim descent from one of the 10 biblical lost tribes of Israel. Their sole goal is to attain Aliyah, that is, to return to the Holy Land. But with the war raging in Gaza, their dream seems elusive.
We've been coming to Israel for the past more than 30 years now, under the guidance of our revered Rabbi Eliyahu Michael from Jerusalem. Ali started in the, early 1990s, and then it's gone on to this day. Of course, there is a definite government policy to bring us here, but then of course things have been mired in bureaucracy and delays and all those things, which we all are very, very familiar with. So at this point of time, we have to understand one thing is that we have compulsory conscription here. Anybody from the age of 18 to 21 has to serve in the IDF. That is there. And most of our boys do serve in that.
The ones in the IDF, we cannot talk to them because they are prohibited from communicating outside. Their family members, I'm in touch with them every day. We hear the news. They're also all very perturbed and anxious, but they're all there. They're part of the system.
It's the most unfortunate thing to be a Kuki B'nai Menashe Jewish person at this point of time. First of all, we're facing a war here in Israel, and then we're facing an ethnic cleansing and a program for annihilation in Manipur, which is being I can tell you straight-faced because the state government's complicit in this.
Jewish community, along with the other Kuki communities, have scattered into the hills, and they were displaced. They lost their livelihood. They're living off relief in relief camps. We hope we have been asking the authorities in Israel that we really need to have some kind of emergency lifting of the community there. We are also working hard and regularly in touch with the system in Israel to organize a kind of an emergency Aliyah ship, transportation for all of them.
Even as about 300 Indian Jews fight Hamas, 5,000 community members in Manipur and Mizoram await their turn to travel to the Promised Land.
Shanta, what are the Indian Jewish associations in Israel? What's the mood there like now?
So there are two main NGOs over there. One is Shavai Israel and another one is Degel Menashe. They help the Jewish community in India, mainly the Benai Menashe community, which is one of the lost biblical tribe of Israel, to move to Israel because that is their ultimate goal in life, that is return to the Promised Land. And of course, they are worried and they want their people to come to Israel as soon as possible. But the interesting part is this, that the Benai Menashe community in India India are stuck with twin crises. One is because they mostly used to stay in Manipur and parts of Mizoram.
Right.
Because of the ethnic clashes that had hit over there, most of them had moved to other parts of the country or are staying in the camp area. So they are also appealing to the Israel government that as soon as the war subsides, or if the situation becomes a little stable, then an emergency alay or emergency lifting of them should take place, because at the end of the day, that's what their goal is, to return to the promised land.
Right. And how many? There are 200 reservists who are fighting there in the IDF?
Yes, there are more than 200 reservists who have been called for by the IDF, and they are fighting over there. And also there are other people who have been trained. So that is the generally, the rule that whoever reaches over there from India or other parts of India, they have to go into this compulsory conscription, and after that, whenever they are called upon, they will fight. So yes, there are around 5,000 of them in India and around 5,000 in Israel, and out of which more than 300 are part of IDF now.
So 300 are part of IDF,
Yes.
and they are wrestling in the horns of a twin dilemma. There's ethnic strife back home, and there's conflict in the promised land, so to speak. And that's all we have time for this evening. Thank you for joining me on the News 9 Plus show. We'll be tracking news and developments from around the world. Thank you.